Welcome to the podcast series, Small Business Survival Conversations. Through our weekly conversations, we hope to provide you with strategies and insights, knowledge and expertise to enlighten you as you work to build and grow your business.
Good morning, business warriors. I'm your host, Anna Steinfest, and you're listening to Small Business Survival Conversations podcast, the show built for people who show up before sunrise, stay up past midnight, and do it all over again the next day. Welcome to your Monday morning motivation segment. Now, I want you to take a deep breath. You made it through another week. And now it is Monday again. And Monday doesn't care how tired you are. Monday doesn't care what went wrong last week. Monday doesn't care that you're still processing something hard, still figuring something out, still trying to hold everything together. Monday just shows up. And so do you. That's why you're here. So today, I want to take you somewhere far away from your inbox, your invoices, and your stress. I want to take you back 2,500 years to a narrow mountain pass on the eastern coast of Greece, to a moment in history so extraordinary that we're still talking about it today. This is the story of King Leonidas, and it is the most powerful business lesson I have ever encountered. So the year is 480 BC. The Persian Empire, at that point, the largest empire the world had ever seen, is on the march. King Xerxes, the ruler of Persia, has assembled a force so massive that ancient historians wrote the army drank rivers dry as they passed through. Modern historians believe the force numbered in the hundreds of thousands. Some estimates say close to 1 million soldiers. And they were headed for Greece. Now, I want you to picture Greece at this time. It was not one unified country. It was a collection of independent city-states. Athens, Sparta, Corinth, Thebes, each with their own politics, their own rivalries, their own pride. Sound familiar? It sounds a little like the small business landscape, doesn't it? Everyone doing their own thing, everyone protecting their own turf, and meanwhile, something massive is coming for all of them. The Greek city-states knew Xerxes was coming. They had time to prepare. But could they agree on something? Could they unify? Could they put aside their differences long enough to face a common threat? Mostly no. Some cities surrendered before a single arrow was fired. Some stayed on the sidelines. Some were still arguing politics while the enemy sharpened its swords. And into this chaos steps one man, King Leonidas of Sparta. Now, Leonidas was not a young man. He was not reckless. He was not acting on emotion. He was experienced. He was strategic, and he understood something that most of the other leaders around him did not. You do not have to fight every battle on the enemy's terms. Xerxes wanted to march his army down through Greece in a wide, overwhelming sweep. Numbers, power, intimidation, the sheer unstoppable moment of an empire. But Leonidas studied the geography, and he found something. A narrow coastal pass in central Greece called Thermopylae. I'm sorry, I think I'm chopping the name, but I'll try it again. Thermopylae. In Greek, it means the gates of fire. So for my Greek listeners, I really apologize. So this word means the gates of fire. It was flanked on one side by steep, impassable cliffs, and on the other side by the sea. At its narrowest point, the pass was barely wide enough for a handful of men to walk through side by side. And Leonidas had a thought that changed history. What if I choose the battlefield? Not the battlefield Xerxes wants, not the open plains where his numbers are unstoppable weapon, but the battlefield, my terms, my terrain. At Thermopylae, the narrow pass would neutralize the Persian advantage entirely. It didn't matter if Xerxes had 300,000 soldiers or 3 million. Only a fraction of them could engage at any given moment. The rest were useless. They were stuck behind each other, crowded on a path no wider than a hallway. Leonidas arrived at Thermopylae with roughly 7,000 Greek soldiers. But history remembers the 300 because I think a lot of us watched the movie. His personal guard, his elite Spartan warriors, men who had trained their entire lives for exactly this kind of moment. And for 2 full days, they held. For 2 days, a force of a few thousands Greeks fighting in formation, fighting smart, fighting in the right terrain, stopped the greatest army in the ancient world dead in its tracks. Xerxes sent his best troops, his cavalry, his elite Persian immortals, warriors said to be undefeatable. They could not break through. Business warriors, I need you to hear this next part very carefully now. The Persians did not fail because they were weak. They failed because they were in the wrong place. Their greatest strength, sheer overwhelming numbers, was completely useless in that narrow pass. Now I want you to flip that around. How many of you are running a business right now feeling like you're losing simply because you're fighting in the wrong place? You're trying to compete on platforms where big corporations have unlimited budgets. You're trying to match the production quality of brands with entirely media teams. You're trying to outprice companies that can afford to run at a loss for years just to kill the competition. And you're wondering why it feels impossible. It's not because you're not good enough. It's because you're fighting in the open field and you are built for the pass. See, the pass is different for every business. But it always comes down to the same question. Where can I compete that a giant cannot? Because here's what large corporations cannot do. They cannot know their customers by name. They cannot pivot in 48 hours. They cannot pick up the phone and personally solve a problem before it comes a complaint. They cannot carry the kind of authentic story that you carry. They cannot offer the human connection that makes someone feel seen, heard, and valued. That is your Thermopylae. That is your narrow pass. That is where you fight. But here is the part of this story that most people skip right over. Before Leonidas ever set foot at Thermopylae, he visited the oracle at Delphi. In ancient Greece, the oracle was the closest thing you had to divine guidance. Leaders, generals, kings, they all went to Delphi before major decisions. And the oracle delivered a prophecy. The prophecy said this: either Sparta loses a king or Sparta itself will fall. Okay, I want you to hear this, and I'm going to repeat this slowly. Either the leader dies or the kingdom is lost. Leonidas walked out of that temple knowing with as much certainty as any leader can know anything that he was probably not coming back. And he went anyway. Now, I want you to pause right here, because I think this is the part that separates good leaders from great ones. And it's the part that separates struggling business owners from ones who build something lasting. Most people make decisions based on what feels safe. Leonidas made his decision based on what mattered most. He wasn't going to Thermopylae because he thought he would win. He was going because Greece needed time, because someone had to slow the Persian advance so the rest of Greece could prepare, because the mission was bigger than his own survival. And here's what he did next that absolutely floors me every time I think of it. He hand selected his 300 soldiers, but he did not choose his best soldiers. He chose warriors who already had sons. Read that again. He chose men who had already passed their name forward, men whose legacy would continue even if they did not. Because Leonidas was not just thinking about the battle, he was thinking about what comes next. Business warriors, that is leadership. That is the kind of thinking that builds something that lasts. Because how many of us are so deep into day-to-day, the bills, the emails, the social media algorithm, the slow month, the difficult client, that we have completely lost sight of the bigger picture? You are not just building a business. Remember that you're building a legacy. You're creating jobs. You are giving people a place to work with dignity. You're serving your community. You're showing your children, or maybe the young people watching you, what it looks like to build something with your own hands. Your courage is creating something that will outlive the hard season you are in right now. And sometimes we need to zoom out and remember that. Now, as we all know, the story takes a painful turn. After 2 days of holding the pass, the Spartans were betrayed. A local man, a Greek man, not a Persian, a man named Ephialtes, went to Xerxes and showed him a hidden mountain trail that ran around the back of the pass, a path that the Persians could use to surround Thermopylae from above. Ephialtes did it for money. And I'll just let this sit there for a moment. Because some of the greatest threats to your business will not come from your competitors. They will come from people you trusted, people who are close to you, a business partner who chose their own interests over the partnership, a key employee who walked out the door and took your clients with them. A vendor who promised one thing and delivered another. A collaborator who shared things they should not have. Betrayal inside the pass is always more dangerous than the army at the gate. When Leonidas got word that the Persians had found the secret path, that his forces would soon be surrounded, he made a decision. He sent most of the Greek allies home. He gave them a chance to survive. He honored them by protecting their lives. But he and his 300 Spartans stayed, not because they thought they could win, but because someone had to hold the line long enough for the message to reach the rest of the Greece. Long enough to buy time, long enough to say, this is what we stand for, and we will stand here. They were outnumbered, they were surrounded, and they fought until the last man fell. As we all know again, the Persians won the Battle of Thermopylae, technically. But something happened in the aftermath that no one expected. The story spread, word of what 300 Spartans had done, of how they had stood against an empire and made it bleed, spread through every city-state in Greece, and it lit a fire. The Greeks who had been hiding, waiting, surrendering, they rose. At the naval battle of Salamis, the Greek fleet crushed Persia on the water. At the land battle of Plataea, the Persian army was defeated. Xerxes retreated. The empire that seemed unstoppable turned around. And it all started at Thermopylae. The battle that was lost won the war. Business warriors, I need you to hear this. Some of the seasons you're in right now are not losing seasons. They're Thermopylae seasons. Seasons where you feel outnumbered, outspent, outgunned. Seasons where you're not sure you're making progress because you cannot see what your consistency is building underneath the surface. Seasons where nobody's clapping, nobody's sharing your posts, nobody's leaving the 5-star reviews. You're waiting and you keep showing up anyway. That is not failure. That is the most important kind of courage there is. Because here's what I have learned from watching business owners build and rebuild and build again. The breakthrough rarely goes to the most talented person in the room. It goes to the most consistent. Motivation says, I'll do it when I feel inspired. Discipline says, I'll do it because this is who I am. Motivation is feeling it comes and it goes. Discipline is identity. It stays. And the businesses that are still standing in 5 years, in 10 years, they won't be the ones that had the best launch. They'll be the ones that kept adapting, kept learning, kept refining their positioning, kept showing up for their customers even when the season was brutal. Businesses rarely collapse overnight. The mindset collapses first. So I want you to guard yours like it is the most valuable asset you own, because it is. And here is one final thought before we get to your action step for this week. History does not remember Xerxes as the man who won at Thermopylae. History remembers Leonidas, not because he survived, but because of what he stood for. There are people in your city, in your industry, in your community who will one day look back and say, that person showed me what it meant to keep going. That person showed me what it looked like to build something real. You may never know their names today, but your example is touching people you cannot see. So I want you to keep going, not just for the revenue, not just for the recognition, but because the world needs more people who refuse to quit on something that matters. So here it is. Simple, powerful, one action step this week. So what I want you to find this week, I want you to find your Thermopylae. Pull out a piece of paper or open a notes app on your phone, and I want you to ask one question. What is the one thing my business does that a big corporation simply cannot replicate? Not 5 things, not a list, one thing. Maybe it's that you know every single one of your customers by their first name and their dog's name. Maybe it's that you can turn around a custom order in 24 hours when a competitor takes 3 weeks. Maybe it's that you have lived through exactly what your clients are going through, and that lived experience is embedded in everything you offer. Maybe it's that your community trusts you in a way they will never trust a faceless brand. I want you to find out that one thing, and I want you to write it down. And then this week, I want you to make every business decision through that lens. Does this reinforce my strength? Does this protect my past? Does this take me further into the terrain where I am hardest to bear? If yes, do it. If no, let it wait. I want you to stop trying to fight everything. I want you to fight where you are the strongest. That is how small business survive. And that is how they grow. Thank you so much for spending your Monday morning with me. If this message encouraged you today, please share it with one business owner in your life you need to hear it. And you could text them. You might be the reason they don't quit this week. And remember, business warriors, history does not remember the people who had it easy. History remembers the people who stood their grounds. I'm Anna Steinfest, and this is Small Business Survival Conversations. Now, I want you to go protect your past. Have an incredible Monday, everyone.
You've been listening to the Small Business Survival Conversation podcast. Make sure to like, rate, and review the show. And don't forget to join us next week for another episode. In the meantime, hook up with us on our Facebook group at Small Business Survival Tools and Tips. Till next time, thank you for listening.